Hi, welcome to the session uh, on gender, the state, and development. Yeah, this is another session, and the topic is concerned with discussion related to paradigm shifts from the development measures using economic measures towards gender as another measure for development. So we'll look at a shift from economic measures to human development, and then to gender equality measures. So a reminder on the concept of gender. So we looked at it as a socially constructed difference or distinctions between men and women, boys and girls, and of course the distinctions have to do with roles, responsibilities, access to services or resources, control to resources, and benefits of control and access those resources, such as if you have, for instance, does one have access to employment or income, and then how do they have control to such incomes or benefits of such incomes. Yeah, so the gender perspective looks at how a certain issue or problem or objective or measure applies to different genders, boys, girls, men, and women. So in that case, we the gender perspective is looking at measuring development from the perspective of gender, so that one can look at how men or women or boys or girls benefit from development differently, or in that case, so that when certain interventions are made, they should be made that they can equally benefit, they can bring about development that equally benefits everyone in society. Yeah, so development from a gender perspective. So if development, we can find, we already we are going to let us see, remind ourselves the definitions of development. But if we look at development from a gender perspective, we are looking at development process of that empowers or creates an environment that enables fairness and participation of everyone. And therefore, when we, for instance, we are examining particular development interventions, we should be able to test or check who benefits, who loses, what trade-offs have been made, or what is the resulting balance of rights and obligations between genders, or what is the resulting balance of power and privileges between men, women, or boys and girls, and of course between other general social groups. And you, of course, at a later stage in one of the final sessions, we'll be looking at the issue of gender analysis and intersectionality. And you find that while we may want to look at how the project has affected or impacted uh, uh, women and men, you might find that certain groups of women do not actually benefit from particular development interventions compared to other certain groups of women. So those are the some of the issues we need to be looking at as development experts when we want to test whether development is being achieved from a gender perspective. So let's just remind ourselves what development is. So it's a dynamic concept, and of course that dynamism brings about different definitions, different meanings, and you'll find that we can have as many definitions of development as people in this world. I mean, if you ask a young girl or a young boy, they might view development differently. If you ask a teenager, could view differently from development differently from an old person. If you ask a woman who is experiencing in gender inequalities at household, could view different development differently from a woman who is employed and lives in the urban center. So that kind of dynamism brings about a multiple kinds of definitions. So it involves, but of course generally it's multidimensional, and the dimensions include economic, politics, social and psychological. But of course towards now, in these days, it is now towards human development aspects that look at, or other different aspects, as we shall see at a later stage in a moment. So Todaro and Smith brings about the idea that we shouldn't be looking at development as mere economic phenomenon, but rather a multidimensional aspect that involves reorganization or reorientation of the entire economic and social systems, but of course also political systems. So an example of definition by Todaro. Yeah, of course, you might, as an individual, you also have your own, but sometimes we might want to see how different people have defined it and see if their definitions fit in ours. So Todaro and Smith look at it as a process of improving the quality of all human lives with three equally important objectives. So one of the objective for development is that it should be able uh, uh, to increase the ability of meeting basic needs. Of course, basic needs look at safety or education, food, health, and the rest. So, and that there must be some kind of sustenance for those basic needs. But development process should also be able to bring about freedom. Freedom in terms uh, of situations where you have many alternatives and individuals have all kinds of means to be able to choose what they want or need uh, among those real life choices or alternatives based on their preferences. When you're looking at economics, when you are studying economics, for those who studied economics, you looked at aspects of taste, choices, and preferences. So that's what we're referring to here, that if choices, preferences, and tastes are diverse, then one should have that freedom or ability to make such choices. And if such is achieved, then that is development. But also, one should also be able to be happy, or take an example, to appear in public without shame. Okay, you have self-esteem. So it is very important that one feels worth to be part of a particular society, rather than looking at themselves being isolated or seeming powerless or weak, or yeah, because of course issues of poverty. That is why one of the simple definition of development is reduction of poverty, that reduced poverty equals development. Okay, so there are many different definitions in relation to income, definition in related to attaining basic services, relation development related to human rights, all kinds of development. And of course, from this module that we're looking at, also development from a gender perspective, as we have already seen. Yes, so the meaning of development in summary could mean it's a process, it's an end and a means in itself. An end meaning that you have been able to achieve what you want, but that end could also mean a means to achieving other things. You take an example of education. You study to 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 be to become literate. You achieve high levels of literacy, but that itself can be an end, that you are an educated person. Yeah, people will be seeing, oh, that person is educated, they have achieved it. But education itself could be an end, but in other word, in other ways, it is a means, because you need to be educated to be employed, to get a better employment, and then have better income, and therefore you use that other income to do other things. That's what we mean by end and means in self. So development can mean positive change, qualitative or quantitative change. So there is some kind of transformation. It is about progress. It is about overcoming poverty. It is about reducing or eliminating gaps. So for us, of course, in that case, will be our gender issues rotate here, that want to close gaps between particular social groups, men and women. Okay. So if there is some high level of gender equality and equity, then that is development, because everyone is able to benefit from that. And of course it is universal. But one most important thing is that development cannot happen in a vacuum. It needs actors to be able to make that needed transformation to create change. Okay. So there have been paradigm shifts uh, in definitions and measures. Um, for instance, when you were looking at, I remember, I think when you were studying development theories or introduction to development concept or something like that, you must have looked at theories, modernization theory, dependency theory, then you move towards sustainable development or human development, or and also of course moving towards gender and development. So there are all sorts of theories and approaches or models to development. So here we are looking at a shift from economic based measures, which have to do with GDP or GNP and income, towards human development measures. Of course, it looks at education, health, and income. And then, of course, looking at mainly capabilities and functionings, what someone can be able to do or be. And then towards gender equality or equity measures, where you have measures of gender gaps and gender inequalities. Uh, yeah, so that's that kind of a shift. So we are now looking at how development has been shifting in terms of how it is measured, and then looking at how the gender perspective now has come in to be looked at as an important aspect of development. So we've already we already looked at this meaning of development in summary, and we are now looking at the shifts in the measurements. So take an example. Let's take a quick distinction, a quick look at the distinction between human development and economic growth. So this economic growth is the oldest, the traditional kind of measure of development. Okay, and then that was in the early and mid decades of the past century. Of course, we still have such measures, but now we have expanded the measurements to be able to look at different aspects, and that are later combined to define the general meaning of development. So the modernization theory and the rest all were concentrating on economic growth. Um, and then of course, later on there was a realization that, wait, we are concentrating on quantity of things, of goods, and quality of goods and services. What about people themselves? And therefore now a shift towards human development, uh, which looks at expanding people's choices, okay, rather than only looking at the economic growth. Human development dealing with functionings and capabilities, what people can do or be, rather than looking at concentrating on utility of goods and services or satisfaction. Looking at issues of human capabilities, equality of incomes, fairness and justice in institutional arrangements. Take an example of how the state can be able to provide services and goods for the betterment of everyone, rather than looking at industries or infrastructure or goods and services that have been produced by a particular country. So we in that case there is a shift from the means, which has to do with human resources for economic equality, economic activity, to look at more of ends with beneficiaries and means by particular agents. Okay, and then you have individual human development to do with individual action, which has to do with agency, one's capacity to do something, and also collective action, where you have people participating collectively or with the same efforts towards achieving a particular development. But here you see economic growth has to do with individual action, income for one person or services for a particular person. Okay. um, so if you remember issues of neoliberalism and those market structures, okay. So human development has emphasis on equality and on the human rights of all individuals, but economic growth has to do with just concerns with poverty, mainly, of course, looking at the GDP and GNP. So the conditions enabling human development could be health services, education, employment opportunities. Okay, let me see if I can just expand this again, so that we don't miss out. Okay, so you have conditions enabling economic development or economic growth, people's knowledge and skills, efficient use of human capital, or sound economic policies that can favor infrastructure development, market development, and the rest, without, of course, looking at how whether democracy is okay, or if employment is for everyone or not. Okay. So let's just, if we take a quick look at what I mean, more details on economic development measures. So, is the measure of welfare of humans in a society, and of course, the indicators of economic development include economic growth. That's what we just talked about. So, when it comes to economic growth, there we are more looking at values of outputs in terms of goods and services within a particular period of time. Of course, that relates to the gross domestic product, the GDP, and national incomes, the measures of national product, and of course per capita income. So you can see that economic development is more concerned with incomes and production of goods and services, okay, rather than looking at what humans can actually use from those incomes and the rest to be able to achieve their personal objectives or aspirations. So there is a problem with that, of course, and the problem with that is that economic growth can, looking at the general income of a country, can just give a misconception about uh, development of everyone. Okay. Then, of course, what about the quality of life? Can changes in economic growth measures change in the quality of life? You have industries, for instance, if you have high level of industrialization or industrial growth, uh, does the do does having many industries in a particular area result in the general well-being of everyone? You could be having, for instance, a sugar processing industry, but then how do people benefit from it equally to achieve their own objectives? Okay. It could be, I mean, for instance, you have that factory, but the factory is actually polluting the environment, and the pollution of the environment affects, let's say, for instance, water sources, and people would die. So that's what we're talking about by quality of life. Okay. Or are the goods and services distributed equally, if we want to indeed concentrate on goods and services because they are important anyway? Or does additional earnings of power bring it with, okay, other issues such as increasing working hours or increased family problems? If we look at this from a gender perspective, yes, you're saying, okay, let's, okay, you have been talking about bringing women in into development projects and the rest. Let us now bring them. But does bringing those women in particular interventions address other issues, or it is actually increasing them? Because you'll find, yes, you're saying let this woman participate in working in a particular industry, but yes, it is okay because that improves their income, but it is also in one way or the other increasing their burden between the formal work and informal work. Okay, they have to work, and then they have also at their formal jobs at this factory. When they go home, they also have to take care of their of the reproductive roles. Okay, so how, and also again find that you find that even this at workplace they are not paid as the way men are paid, and yet they are doing uh, much work. Okay, you can use an example of this. I don't know if you all come from Uganda, but there is this dyeing factory industry that makes hair extensions, artificial hair. Yeah. So you see how those women uh, are going there every day to work in shifts, but the amount paid to them might not match uh, they what they actually do in those factories. But then, in addition to that, add there the work that they do at home. So it's also those are some of the problems we are looking at with economic growth measures. Then what about the informal sector? I've just talked about that. The unpaid household work and community charitable work. How do we include in that? And yet economic growth does not look at it. So validate the problems with measuring development as economic growth. So if we define development in terms of economic growth, we miss issues related to personal capabilities, that is deprivation, environmental, infectious diseases. I just talked about pollution previously. Social, public goods or collective goods and services, health and education. You relational, we miss to see how, I mean, I just talked about issues of self-esteem. Okay, to be able to appear in public without shame. Okay, household, power relations, gender relations at household. Okay, who controls what, who accesses what, is it men or, okay, problems with general surveys. Okay, sampling who is represented or is not represented. What about satisfaction of kinds of development that is achieved? So take an example of power relations or productive activities that are not counted. the next slide. So you have here, for instance, the GNP through a gender lens. So GNP is looking at value added created through production process of finished goods and services. Of course, that is a combination or a total of all human activities. But when it comes to the measurement, we'll be looking at productive activities, of course, and then looking at GNP, market value, uh, and imputed values. Okay, but then there is something that is missing somewhere: the non-productive activities that also contribute to the GNP or GNI, and then of course. Largest part of household work or community activities are not calculated because these measures are looking at the final goods, but not considering what someone had to go through to the extent of making sure that these goods are produced. And yet this is not counted. Okay. So you have more household activities, okay, but largest part remains uncounted. You have a woman who is contributing to production of a certain coffee product, but they do other work at home, such as sorting that coffee, sorting the coffee beans at home without being paid. So how do we do that? So in that case, we would go back and look at, okay, who was able to, who cultivates the coffee gardens, who harvests, and then who sells, and then who controls those resources from that. So those are some of the issues that we miss if we are looking at development from an economic growth perspective alone. Okay. So another example of unpaid care. See, you can see, for instance, here, okay, average weekly number of hours spent on unpaid care work by age, okay, 5 years up and above, 2012, 2013, 2016, and 2017. So you have weekly hours of work here, and then you have females and males in 2012 and 2013, and then you have male and females in 2016, 2017. Okay, this is of course Uganda. Okay, Uganda National Health Survey is 2012, 13, and then 2016, 2017. So you can see the difference here, that in 2013, 18, most of women who are between 18, most women generally, most women, if you look at this, most women do most women do much of unpaid work compared to men. Okay, and you can also look at the age differences. If you see 2012 to 2013, you'll see that most women between age of 18 and 30 do most of the unpaid work. I think about those who just got married at home and then the work they do when they stay at home. But of course, so the statistics changed by 2016, 2017. So that means something has been done to reduce on such gender disparity when it comes to who does the unpaid work mostly. Okay. So in that case, because of all those problems, we see a shift from concentrating on GNP and GDP, or rather economic growth. Because yes, we are saying increased income and quality of goods and services is essential for everyone. But then, what about the quality of the lives of those who are engaged in such? Okay, so in that case, we do see an economic shift a shift from economic development as a means, but not as an end. So therefore, towards creating a development, kind of development with the human face, where we also look at the quality of lives of people. Okay. So that brings us to human development as another measure of looking at development, as we had looked at it in a summative way earlier on. Okay, so human development paradigm focuses on the theoretical underpinnings of SIN's capabilities approach, and the capabilities approach by SIN holds that a person's capability to have various functioning vectors and to enjoy the corresponding well-being achievements to be the should be the best indicator of welfare. Welfare in this case, that's the development we're looking at. So therefore, there should be analysis and a gender kind of an analysis of development that does not only look at the utility bit of development, but also the opportunities available for individuals. So can a person be able to study? Can be a person be able to get employed? Can a person be able to access water or health services? So rather than merely looking at income levels. So creating an enabling environment in which people can enjoy long, healthy, and creative lives. Okay, so that takes us back to what Todaro and Smith were saying earlier. Freedoms. So human development is thus focusing on expanding the real freedoms that people can enjoy, and that has to do with removing those obstacles. So the obstacles in this case, if we look at it from the gender perspective, some women won't be allowed to go to work. Okay, I don't know if you have such cases in your communities, but we've had women who have gone to school, they've studied to achieve something better in their lives, and then when it comes to marriage, they get married, and then they get home after marriage, and the husband says, okay, you know what, please stay home, do not have to work. I would rather pay you to stay home, or not even paying you, just stay home. That is some kind of an obstacle, because it is limiting some kind of freedoms for that woman to achieve her own individual aspirations. I'm not saying that marriage shouldn't be about some kind of relations where you agree, take decisions that, but such decisions should be able to be fair and equitable in that case. Okay, so human development is concerned about expanding the range of things that a person can be or do, and those are the capabilities and functionings that we're talking about. So ability to be healthy or well nourished, to be knowledgeable, or to participate in community life. It does not benefit. It doesn't make sense where a woman is the one who has to fetch water from a long distance, water source, and yet when it comes to making decisions regarding community water sources, women are not involved. Okay, so it's look at it from that perspective. So the Human Development Report 1995 then brings the actual aspect of gender equality. Okay, and recognizes the injustice of gender equality. Okay, if human development is a process of enlarging choices of all people, it should not be just part of particular categories of people, but it should be for both men, women, and girls and boys. Okay, it becomes unjust and discriminatory if women are excluded from such benefits. Okay, yeah, so it's about expanding people's choices. Okay, the capabilities and functionings that I was talking about. So the functionings mean the valuable things that the person can do or be, and the capabilities refer to the differences, different combinations of those functionings. Okay, so in this case, you're looking at increasing your agency urgency to be able to also influence some kind of corrective action, okay, to participate and work with others, okay. So freedom is associated with human rights, and of course that's linking human rights and development in that case, if you may. Okay. So in simple terms, okay, we are looking at human rights. So but of course, most importantly, we ask ourselves, okay, so if human development is has to do with the process of enhancing human capabilities or expanding freedoms, doesn't that mean human rights? And then who is the best actor in this arena to be able to promote those freedoms and expansion of those freedoms and human rights? It basically it is the state. So the role of state or other actors and individuals to ensure that the realization of human rights are achieved. So the state in this case as our main actor of focus in this module, the state has a bigger role to expand those choices. So later on in the next session, when we are looking at the role of state in improving or promoting gender equality, or in looking at increasing on issues of women to be part of decision making, that is what we mean by expanding those freedoms, because by allowing women to be part of the decision making, you are giving them a chance to be able to present their interests and also be able to influence expansion of those choices of those other women who are in need. So the linkage between economic growth and human development, so greater freedom and capabilities, which is human development, improves economic performance. And of course, human development has an important effect on economic growth and development, because increased incomes would lead to a range of choices and capabilities, which can be enjoyed or by both individuals, at households and governments. And of course, at the later stage, that would bring about development and economic development and human development. So human development, I won't go much deep into this, but you can always provided links of where you can always find such data. Okay, so the HDI, or rather the Human Development Index, looks beyond gross domestic product. Okay, to look at much of well-being. So rather than looking at only income and goods and services, we also need to measure dimensions such as living a long, that a person should be able to live a long and healthy life, which is measured by life expectancy, should be able to get educated, measured by literacy and enrollment at all levels of school, but also having a decent standard of living, which looks at purchasing power parity, or income for individuals, not just at national level. Okay. So key aspects in relation to the measures: so literacy, health, which has to do with life expectancy. Because if we are talking about how long does a person live, we are looking at their health. Okay, child mortality and maternal mortality as examples of aspects for life expectancy. Human rights and freedoms, democracy, or income, poverty and distribution, and of course gender equality. In that case, we can look at gender equality as a component of human development. So how is gender equality a development issue? So in the 1995 report, which looks at gender equality from human development from a gender equality perspective, says that the relentless struggle of for development equality will change most of today's premises for socio, economic, and political life. So in that case, of course, we're looking at how then can we integrate, if we have looked at expansion of choices and enlarging capabilities and functionings of freedoms. How then can we bring in the aspect of gender? So the basic then we look at the three essential components, which is equality of opportunity for all, sustainability of such opportunities, and then empowerment of people to participate. Okay, so someone has equal rights to participate in decision making, but those equal rights and participation should be sustained, and that person should be able to be empowered to continue participating, okay, and benefit from development processes. And so in that case, if you look at it from the perspective of women participating in politics, this is what we are looking at: opportunity for them to participate as people, as human beings, sustainability of such participation, of such opportunities from one generation to another. Not that, okay, women, we are allowing you to participate in this decade, but in the next coming decades, okay, no more, no. So we are looking at the opposite of that. So empowerment, be able to empower them, educate them, so that when they go to participate, or empower them with information, when they go to participate, they should be able to say something or make contributions. So equality in development. So when we talk about equality in development, we're looking at equality of opportunities, equality of reward, equal rewards, equal access to basic services, equal opportunities, equal protection, elimination of discrimination, or with regard to gender-based violence or violence against women, or human trafficking, and the rest, reducing, removing such, or equal rights to all citizens, both in public but also in private. We have had issues of where victims or survivors of gender-based violence or domestic violence go to a police station and they want justice. They are seeking justice, but then the police person is telling them that, look, if your husband beat you or if your wife beat you, please go back home. That is a domestic issue. But here we are looking at that people should be able to equally access same rights or have same equal rights, whether in public or in private. Okay, so we have different kinds of gender equality and inequality measures and indicators, and I have given you a list here, but we are not going to look at all of them, but you can be able to check them out for your own extra understanding. So we have gender related development index, we have gender empowerment measure, and we have gender equality index. Okay, so this was until 2010, and this was until 2010 too, and of course from 2010 then the gender inequality index was adopted. It succeeded these other two. Okay, so we have African Gender and Development Index, which mainly concentrates on the African continent, looks at Gender Status Index and African Women's Progress scoreboard. And then you have the Gender Equality Index, which looks at the social watch, and then the Gender Gap Index, introduced by the World Economic Forum. I have provided videos on that. You can take a look at that, and see how it is done. And then the Gender Institutions and Development Database by OECD. So all these provide some kind of measure to look at how gender is factored in development. So just to take a look quickly at some of these measures. So you have gender related index, which I just talked about, that ended until 2010, but it was looking at health, education, and command over economic resources. Okay, so I've given you this link, you can check it out. to see how the measurement is done. So you have these two links, okay, uh, to see some of the examples of those measures. Yeah, but of course, so it uses it uses disaggregated data to measure the differences between men and women, women's achievements in these three basic dimensions of education, health, and command over resources. The gender empowerment measure, which I also said it was until 2010, was also looking at also looks at the inequalities between men and women's opportunities in a country, and a combination of inequalities in three key areas of political participation and decision making, economic participation and decision making, but also power over economic resources. So you can see that there is some kind of relationship between these different measures. And then we have the gender index, inequality index, which later succeeded the other measures that we just talked about. So from 2010, and because the gender inequality remains a major barrier, then the index focuses on those inequalities. But of course, looking at three main categories of reproductive health, measured by maternal mortality ratio, and adolescent birth rate, and looking at empowerment, which is measured by how many women are taking seats in parliament, or administrative positions in politics. Okay, and of course, looking at the economic status from the perspective of participation, market participation, measured by labor force participation, looking at the rate of female and males aged 15 and above. So you can visit this website and check how that is done. Okay. There is also the global gender gap, introduced by World Economic Forum. You can visit the website and of course check it out. And of course it examines four critical areas of inequalities between men and women. The economic participation and opportunity. So take issues of salaries or in employment, education attainment, in terms of how many years of schooling or enrollment, or those who enrolled, how many did complete certain levels. And then of course between men and women here, that's what we're looking at. Then political empowerment in terms of representations in decision making, local governments or legislation, or think about all the arms of government, um, uh, justice or executive. Okay, then and also health and survival, issues of life expectancy. So this is why I was telling you that there is some kind of strong link between gender equality and human development measures for development. Okay, so I've also provided these links. You can look at, for instance, some of these reports, and you'll see that one of the exercise that you have is looking at the gender global gap, and you look at the index and see the changes of how many the changes that have happened between 2026 from 2006 onwards, and then so that you can also assess what brought such changes. Okay, in terms of closing the gender gaps, you'll find that many countries may not seem as the way they are. You'll find even when USA claims to be democratic, you'll find that the gender gap there is a little bit wider than even some of the developing countries. So gender inequalities, some of these are some of the gender inequalities. Education, you find gender inequalities in education, men and women or girls and boys are not attaining education equally. You have gaps in health, and you find that that's why you have men. You have high maternal and child mortality rates compared to men. Of course, even though the life expectancy of men and women, even though the life expectancy of women is higher than those of men, but still the mortality rate, the mortality rate is very high. Okay, you have inequalities to do with women receiving disproportionately small share of credit from formal banking institutions. You have high rate of unemployment among women, or women doing a lot of unpaid work compared to men. And then there is a concept of feminization of poverty, where you have many a country, for instance, taken a country or a region or a rural area or an urban center having many women in poverty compared to men. Okay, that's what we mean by feminization of poverty. And then you have political participation and decision making, where you have men being many compared to women. Okay, and you can see also an extra explanation of this. Okay, so the state has a bigger role as a development actor. The state interventions in development, both in power states and welfare states, is very key. State interventions in economic, social, and political and human development are very important. Okay, so if you look at Sin's idea of human development capability approach, which is equated to enhancing capabilities and functionings, the state has a bigger role in expanding those choices and freedoms. Okay, so I've also provided you this link. You can visit it to look at an example of gender equality in looking at how Africa is progressing in such area. And of course, as always, we have comments for review, and you can use them to check out the rationale for shifting, to review the rationale for shifting from economic to human development, and ask yourself, does human involvement in development process have an effective impact on both development but also on women themselves? Women participation in decision making process. Of course, we are going to look at this at a later stage and see how the state has a bigger role in promoting that. Then gender equality cuts across all dimensions of development. The dimensions, remember them: social, economic, and of course political and psychological. Okay, and then the economic growth aimed at the trickle down effects, but does not consider the distribution effects. Yeah, having bigger GDP does not necessarily mean that both men and women are benefiting equally from that GDP when it trickles down. Okay, so therefore the role of state in development. Okay, so for further reviews, we could arrange a live session if you have issues coming from this presentation. So that makes the end of the session. Thank you.